Call this virtual meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee. All participants are asked to keep microphones on mute and cameras off during staff presentations and committee discussions. Participants wishing to speak to an application during the public meeting portion of this meeting will be called on by name one at a time during the public meeting. At that time, the participant called on may unmute their microphone and turn on their camera if they wish to speak. If you wish to speak to or receive further notice regarding the application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. Public participants will receive another sign-in opportunity when the public meeting portion of this meeting is called to order. I am John Wanless, Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. I will now take attendance of our committee members and staff. Please raise your hand or declare your presence when I call your name. Bill Curry. Jacqueline Grimes.
Present.
Councillor Wendy Alford.
Present.
Bill Widdenmeyer.
Present.
Jack Anderson.
Here.
Councillor Jay Brennan.
Present.
Senior Planner Carl Grinke.
Present.
Planning Coordinator Mary Remig.
Present.
To review, committee members are asked to raise their hand when they wish to speak. Members participating by phone will be called on from time to time to speak to an application. Alternatively, please find an appropriate opportunity at any available time to notify the chair verbally if you wish to speak. We'll now have an approval. Can I get a motion for an approval of the agenda?
Also moved.
Moved by Bill, second by Jay. All in favor? Carried. Adoption of minutes for the Planning Advisory Committee meeting, November the 12th, 2020. Moved by Wendy. Seconded by Jack. All in favor? Carried. Any disclosure of monetary interests?
Mr. Chair,
Jacqueline?
I have a conflict of interest with consent application B2005.
Okay. Well, can he remove her, Mary? You can come back in for the other two applications.
You want me to have IT put her in the waiting room right now, John? I'll give you a few more minutes, sorry.
Yeah, after I go through the public address here. Okay, we'll start the public meeting here. The public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. Please be advised you may leave this meeting at any time. Applicants, agents, and members of the public logged into Zoom to participate in this public meeting are asked to please keep their microphones on mute and cameras off until called on by the chair. If you wish to speak to an application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. The purpose of this Planning Advisory Committee meeting is to consider three applications in front of us. Consent application B20-05, minor variance applications MV-20-06, as well as zoning bylaw amendment application ZA-20-08. Firstly, we'll deal with application 20-005. Seeks to sever two parcels on Thurber Street that were inadvertently merged earlier in 2020. The effect of the application will be to restore the original lot boundaries and existed prior to the merger. This would recreate the two original parcels that can be conveyed separately. Secondly, we'll deal with application MV-20-06 requests relief from provisions of the residential type 4 zone for the purposes of accommodating the construction of a multiple dwelling house with 3 units on Maple Avenue. An application ZA-20-08 for a vacant property at the corner of Sussex Street and William East to rezone the subject property to the local commercial special exemption with a holding provision, C2-XH, for the purpose of accommodating a 2-story mixed unit building featuring ground floor commercial unit and a total of 7 residential units. This meeting is your opportunity to provide any feedback on these applications, and the Planning Advisory Committee welcomes any questions and comments you may have. We encourage you to do so at this public meeting, as the Planning Act rules suggest that the public's ability to voice objections later in the process may be limited if a written or oral comment is not submitted. The Planning Advisory Committee is the approval authority for the severance and the variance applications. The committee may choose to make a decision on those applications this evening. Town Council is the approval authority for the application for amendments to the zoning bylaw. The committee will review the application and any comments or concerns from the public to inform their decision on applications B20-05 and MV-20-06 and their recommendations to Council for the application ZA-20-08. We'll now hear application B20-05 for 60-62 Thurber Street. I'll now pass the meeting over to Senior Planner Carl Grenke to report a notification and summary of the application B20-05. Following his presentation, I will call on the public participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. I will also offer the applicant or their agent in attendance an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Dave, could you please load up the PowerPoint presentation for the Thurber Street application? So we're just loading up a presentation that summarizes the proposal and what's before the committee. So this application is for 2 dwellings at 60-62 Thurber Street. Next slide, please. So the application here, it seeks to redivide 2 houses that have historically existed on separate lots, but unfortunately they inadvertently merged on title through a Planning Act just a technicality in earlier 2020. So the proposal here is simply to restore the original lot boundaries as they existed prior to the merger, and that would allow the separate sale of the land. So each property contains a house with a garage, and they each meet the setback requirements outlined in the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So the property, of course, is located in an established residential neighborhood in town. It's across the road from an elementary school and about 2 blocks east of Queen Street. Next slide, please. So there's a site sketch provided by the applicant. Again, the proposal is simply it's a technical exercise to essentially recreate the lot line that had always existed, and they're proposing to retain it as it was beforehand. Next slide, please. So whenever we're considering a consent application, we are guided by provincial policy as well as the town's official plan that gives some direction for how we make land use decisions here. And in this case, this is more of a technical nature. So the application. The plan and the OP and the PPS don't really get into those sorts of more refined details in this particular instance. Next slide, please. So also, if we're creating a new lot, and technically that's what this is doing, it does still need to meet the zoning provisions. So the property is zoned residential type 4. It does prescribe a minimum lot size, minimum lot frontage details. The buildings are as they've always been on the lot. Nothing is proposed to change. So ultimately, the merging of the lots created a non-conformity in zoning, given that there's two dwelling houses on a single lot. So in effect, this application would restore the situation to something more complying and expected. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the public meeting is, of course, to involve the community in considering a decision on the application, and the committee's decision will take into account any feedback that we do receive. And I understand the applicant's agent is present at this meeting and can speak to the application as well. Next slide, please. So at this point, to date, the only feedback we've received was from the health unit that they don't have a concern with the application as it doesn't affect their regulatory jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So in summary, the application restores a long-standing lot configuration. It's entirely consistent with the built form of the neighborhood. There's no new development proposed. It's really a technical correction that's being proposed here that does still have to go through this process in order to allow the sale of one of the parcels. Next slide, please. So based on that, staff are recommending that the Planning Advisory Committee approves this application subject to the conditions outlined here. These are normal conditions that we look at for a severance application. So I think that that'll conclude my presentation, and I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. We'll begin by hearing from members of the public. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. If you have signed in with the recording secretary and have requested to speak to this application, I will call on you by name one at a time to offer your feedback. I will now open the floor to the applicant or their agent to provide any further clarification or comment on the public's concerns. Yvonne?
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to address the issue of a survey that conditional on a reference plan being obtained. I agree with Mr. Grenke that normally that would be required for a severance application, but the purpose of that would be to submit it to the registry office so that they might prepare a new legal description for the property. In this case, the registry office already has what it needs. There already are two separate property identification numbers, and there's two separate registrable descriptions of the property, which are quite simple descriptions describing the property as 52 feet frontage and 120 feet in depth. And given that we're not creating any new boundary, and there's long-standing homes on this property, and there appears to be no dispute as to boundaries, I'm wondering if the committee would consider not making the provision of a reference plan necessary. This property has been sold, 60 Thurber Street, and we're just simply waiting on the technical severance in order to be able to convey the property. And I would suggest that there's really no purpose to be served by the reference plan. It's not going to help the committee determine whether there's, planning compliance, or it's not required for a conveyancing reason. So I'm asking you to please consider not having that condition on the severance. So subject to any questions, those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Yvonne. Okay, I'll now entertain any questions or comments from the committee members. Jay?
Thanks for that. As Carl described, this is a technical exercise we're going through, and from what I understand, this came about as a bequeath, or someone inherited the property And so I guess my question to Carl or Mary is, why is it, given what Yvonne said, why are we asking for another survey if there's one existing?
Carl?
So I don't have a record of an existing survey, but we do have a legal description certainly that's been there for a long time on the property. And as Ms. Lee mentioned, we're not changing any boundaries. Certainly the survey is a condition that we normally use. Ultimately, the decision is up to the committee. And this, I understand, the registry office will accept this without a survey. A survey would also accommodate in the event that there is an existing encroachment along that new lot line that's being proposed. I don't believe it's likely there is, but it gives that additional level of comfort. But ultimately, it is, given that we are working with a property that's or restoring essentially a glitch that's happened earlier on and not really creating anything new. I would certainly I would leave that to the discretion of the committee whether we feel that there is going to be that additional value in this case.
Thanks, Carl. Wendy?
Yeah, I don't see any compelling argument for forcing the proponent to get a survey. My colleagues will have some thoughts on that as well. I had one thought myself though, because this is about the second or third time this glitch that we call it. And as I understand it, when two properties are put under the same name, it automatically combines them. And I wonder if either as the Planning Advisory Committee or staff that we ensure that the lawyers that are involved in town or might be involved in these properties, or perhaps the realtors as well, because if that had not happened, we would not be here tonight listening to this. And so there seems to be some gap in information when this happens to people. So this could have been avoided entirely if and I don't know where the gap is, whether it's with realtors or lawyers, but those are the two that are involved in most of these kinds of things. So I'm wondering whether we shouldn't flag that for that segment of the business community so that proponents like the owners at 60 and 62 don't have to go through this if it can be avoided.
I just wanted to speak to Carl about this, but when you were talking earlier about the encroachment, could you just go over that again, please?
Carl?
Yeah, so one of the in the event that a survey or a building location survey identifies that there is a building that's across a lot line that we weren't aware of, then that, I guess, introduces a new wrinkle into the land sale. So that's one rationale for requiring a survey. It's certainly not necessarily, like, again, it's not. This isn't. I would suggest that a survey is not absolutely it adds value, but not essential in a case like this. But that would introduce an issue, obviously, if an encroachment is found. And I guess the question certainly that I would propose to the committee is, does this become our issue, or it may become our issue to solve a civil matter through a lot line adjustment or something like that later on? But that's certainly not directly a part of what's being considered tonight, which is basically just fixing a glitch.
Okay, what I was thinking of here, you're not speaking of a specific encroachment, because without the survey, I'm just none of these changes in both properties. There's been no changes take place since this last reference.
That's correct.
Okay.
Anyone else? Bill?
I have no remarks on this other than the fact that it sounds pretty straightforward. It was due to an error of some description, and the easiest way to correct it is to do as Carl suggested, and that's to pass the motion.
There's no other question? Jay?
Yeah, let's get this done, but I would take the first condition out for the survey. I mean, it's just, they've sold the property, and it's just going to hold it up and cost them money for us, for red tape, as far as I'm concerned. So.
Is there any further comments from the committee? Jack?
I would appreciate, we brought this up some time ago, but a more professional sketch, or instead of looking, homemade type of thing, be easier for us to, to designate, our thoughts on, instead of just looking a little bit haphazard. I don't mean that as negative as it sounds, but a more professional sketch or drawing. This has been brought up before.
Thanks, Jack. Okay, the committee is tasked with making a decision for this application under Section 53 of the Planning Act. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain a motion. Wendy?
I'll second it.
I move that we proceed with staff's recommendation minus the requirement for a survey.
Yeah.
Seconded by Bill. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process of the application B20-05. Any participants that have not signed in and require further notice regarding this application are asked to please reach out to the planning coordinator, Mary Remig, by phone at the town hall. Appeal rights may be prescribed by the Planning Act, will be outlined on the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or process, I invite you to get in touch with our senior planner or planning coordinator. This concludes the public meeting for the application B20-05 for 60-62 Thurber Street. Participants who do not wish to participate in the remainder of the meeting are welcome to sign out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carl?
So I was just waving goodbye to Ms. Lee.
Sorry, John, before you continue, I need to ask IT to let Jacqueline Grimes back in for the next public meeting. Perfect.
I will now pass the meeting over to Carl Granke to report on notification and summary of application MV-20-06. Following his presentation, I will call on public participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. I will also offer the applicant and their agent in attendance an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would ask once again for Mr. Crawford to load up the new PowerPoint presentation for 36 Maple, please. Thank you. So our second application this evening is a minor variance application at 36 Maple. Next slide, please. The owner and applicant are Tegan and Matthew Mackey. So the property is 386 square meters in size, has about 15 meters or 50 feet of frontage on Maple Avenue. So this lot was actually created back in 2001 as an infill severance. And then the backyard essentially of 38 Maple was severed off to create this new lot. That severance approval was actually appealed by within the community, and the Ontario Municipal Board approved the severance with the condition that the then applicant and town entered into a site plan agreement to essentially prescribe some design direction, essentially to create a more to ensure that the local characteristics are adhered to in a future development proposal. So there was a previous development proposal on the site, and I think some of the committee members here were there for that one. The committee did approve a large single family home. I think it was actually larger than than the triplex that's proposed here. They had there was a height variance increase approved, as well as a front yard setback reduction to 0 that was approved back then. The development never actually did proceed, and the Mackeys have purchased the property and are looking to develop infill here. So what they're proposing is as a triplex, so 3 units stacked vertically on top of each other. The zoning bylaw requires 4 parking spaces for the 3 units, and that's what's being proposed here. So the official plan designates the property residential, and the R4 zoning in this case is the base zoning for low and medium density neighborhoods that were sort of built in the pre-war era, mostly north of the Rideau. So the triplex is subject to site plan control. So if the committee approves the variance, then we would simply need to amend that site plan approval just to accommodate the new form of development. Next slide, please. So a number of minor variances are requested in this case in order to accommodate the requested development. One is a reduction in the front yard setback to a depth of 3.5 meters. One is a reduction in the rear yard setback to a rear yard depth of 6.53 meters. There's also a proposed reduction in the landscaped open space to about 26%. And that's a reduction from the 30% that the zoning normally requires. And then also the proponents would require a reduction in the aisle width with adjacent some of those parallel parking spaces. And also while a triplex is permitted in the R4 zone, the R4 zone also prescribes sort of higher frontage and lot size requirements for a triplex. So that would need to be recognized through this as well. Next slide, please. So this is the development concept that's being proposed here. As you can see, there's 4 parking spaces are proposed with a turnaround at that back corner, and the sketch helpfully shows the requested front yard and rear yard encroachments. And I'm pleased to see the proposal of a tree in the front yard as well. Next slide, please. So what's being proposed here is the proponents are inspired by a brownstone form of development here, and it's not a pattern that I've seen often in Smith Falls, but certainly one that's prominent in many areas. You can see there's brick proposed on most of the sides here, large windows at the front. Next slide, please. And each unit would be about roughly 900 square feet in size. So the purpose of the public meeting is to involve the community in changing the land use rules for an area of land, and that's a critical part of the process here. It's an opportunity for the community and neighbors to ask questions, provide feedback. It's an opportunity for the proponents to present their proposal, respond to questions, and certainly as much as we can, we want to engage a collaborative discussion here, and ultimately the information received and exchanged helps inform the committee's ultimate decision on this application. Next slide, please. So the evaluation, when we do have a minor variance application, we do notify, there's a consultation process that's guided by the Planning Act. And in this case, we posted the notice on site. We circulated abutting property owners within 60 meters or 200 feet of the property. And also as part of the process, we engage other municipal departments and technical review agencies. At the end of the day, there's a lot of thought and consultation goes into these sorts of planning decisions. So the RVCA and the building department didn't have any particular concerns. Public Works has advised that they have no concerns with respect to the serviceability of the lot. It is on, of course, town water and sewer. Unfortunately, there isn't stormwater, but they don't object to the front yard setback. They do have concerns with respect to hardened surfaces and concern there's not enough space to manage the drainage given the lack of storm sewers and high bedrock in that location. The proposed drainage pit on the concept plan, the Public Works is, I guess, reluctant to determine whether that's going to work. And they've also noted there is not a significant buffer between parking spaces and lot lines, and the depth of the turnaround is tight, sort of in that back area. So a lack of allowance for snow storage, and that's essentially a product of the fact that the proponents work to accommodate the required 4 parking spaces in this through this development proposal. Next slide, please. So under Section 45 of the Planning Act, the committee has 4 tests to consider when granting a minor variance. And I'll just go through those in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. The first test is, does this meet the intent of the official plan? So the official plan designates the property as residential. The OP is broadly supportive of a compact, efficient development, and certainly infill in serviced areas is typically desirable and supported by the OP. We support accessible housing for all household types and income levels. A 3-unit dwelling is generally consistent with the mixed density character of the neighborhood. There's a lot of older homes that have been converted into many units here. It's certainly the visual characteristic is predominantly single family homes, but there are a number of conversions that have happened over the years and a few multi-residential areas in that part of town. The OP is broadly supportive of intensification so long as there's adequate snow storage, adequate screening, massing, and the lot coverage is compatible with the neighborhood. And also the OP prescribes goals in stormwater management. The feedback we have unfortunately suggests that there are concerns with respect to the function of the concept, and I think that ties in largely to the hardened surfaces and the overall scale of what we have. Next slide, please. So the second test is does this application meet the general intent of the zoning bylaw? And the committee is asked to consider the rationale behind the zone provisions. Ultimately, the increased lot frontage and lot size requirements of the bylaw recognize that a development of a higher density in this case needs more space and for parking and just broadly, they're usually larger developments. But the minimum landscaped open space provision is used to regulate lot coverage, ensures a compatible building massing on the property, provides greater opportunity for stormwater management and runoff, and ensuring sufficient space for snow storage. And based on the review comments we've received, unfortunately, I can't recommend that that intent is satisfied for that particular provision. Minimum aisle width is prescribed to ensure sufficient circulation and space. The intent of the front yard provision is to maintain the character and appearance of the neighborhood. They are requesting a reduction in the front yard setback, but I think that reduction is actually is a positive in this case. And there was an assessment done as part of the 2012 variance application that looked at front yards along this part of Maple and Gladstone, and most of the development there already is encroaching. So I think 3.5 meters is something is well within reason and well within keeping of the overall character of the neighborhood. So I think that's a portion of the application that's quite supportable. The rear yard setback helps reduce visual impacts and manage the scale of development, and I think I'm satisfied with that because there is a slight reduction, but this is also offset by a height of the building that's actually about 8 or 9 feet below what the zoning maximum is. Next slide, please. So the third test is this a desirable and appropriate development and use on the land? And we look at the lot configuration and the fit within the neighborhood. So the property was created through a consent for infill development. So it is recognized as a lot that's to be developed for residential purposes. Though the committee can consider, well, a triplex is permitted as in the R4 zone, a single family home or something smaller may actually be accommodated as of right or with few variances. That being said, I think on balance, a multiple dwelling house can present a desirable form of infill. And we look at scale and design of the entire package, but I think a 3-unit development can be accommodated here. Design is an important thing to keep in mind, but it's also not typically addressed through the variance process. At this point, the committee is being asked to consider the overall the zoning standards, the massing, the setbacks, the location, what's proposed on the ground with respect to the parking. Though we do encourage, of course, the proponents to have regard for that municipal direction provided through the previous approvals as we work through this. But I do acknowledge certainly the applicants have taken care to present a high quality render, and I appreciate the brick and the attention to detail that have been provided here. Next slide, please. So the question, is this proposal minor in impact and nature? Ultimately, that's not really a mathematical exercise where we look at the numbers, but overall impact assessment of impact. So in achieving the required 4 parking spaces, unfortunately, that's also triggered additional new variances for a couple of the performance standards with respect to landscaped open space and drainage into neighboring properties must be considered. So the agency feedback suggests the scale of development may create offsite impacts, and as such, the impacts of the driveway and landscape variances may not be minor based on the feedback that we've considered. The setback variances, in my opinion, are minor. I don't think they're going to introduce a negative characteristic into the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So I think just in conclusion here, staff agree the site presents a reasonable opportunity for infill development. However, we're not in position to recommend approval based on the feedback we've received. We have consulted with and discussed with the proponent the recommendation and sort of bounced around some preliminary thoughts on perhaps some alterations that could be made. And certainly I'd like to express my appreciation to the proponents for the work that they have done on this file, and certainly and their willingness to work with the committee and staff on potential modifications to create a really good piece of development on this important property. But if there are changes to the proposal, and that includes, say, reducing the parking spaces, for instance, that does create that creates an additional ask that will necessitate a second public meeting. So at this point, we recommend the committee defers a decision on the application to accommodate revisions to the concept plan and discussions between staff and the proponents. And the proponents are certainly they're here at the meeting as well, and they're interested in some of the broad feedback from that the committee members may have to help guide them in the next steps on the process as well. So I'll conclude there and pass the baton back to the chair.
Thanks, Carl. We will begin by hearing from members of the public. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. If you have signed in with recording secretary and have requested to speak to this application, I will call on you by name one at a time to offer your feedback. I will now open the floor to the applicants to provide any further clarification or comment on the public's concerns.
Hi there. My name's Tegan Mackey, and this is my husband, Matt Mackey.
Hello.
I just wanted to give a bit of background where we are really passionate about our build. I grew up in the neighborhood on Montgomery Place, and I know Jack, he was a fellow neighbor back in the day. And so I was born and raised in Smith Falls, and now I'm a teacher here, and I've got my ugly sweater on today, but fortunately you can't see it. And my husband, Matt, we also own a company here in Smith Falls where we build homes and we manage properties and do renovations, so construction and property management. We were really excited about acquiring the lot at 36 Maple. I love that neighborhood, and I love architecture, and I just think the look of a brownstone in that area would be beautiful. Like Carl said, we're open to what your recommendations are. We do have our timelines and our hopes that we can start, something in March or so, but we want everyone to feel good about this. We want all stakeholders to feel good. We thought the 4th parking spot was a requirement, which it is. We're open to 3 parking spots to, reduce the harden.
If that would help move this along.
Yeah, and but also our clientele for this building, it's nice to have that guest parking as well. So open to both options. We weren't given the original site recommendations, so
when we bought the property, we didn't know anything about
yeah, but
what had happened in 2001 or 2002.
We did see the original plan that has been approved, that large single family home that was approved, that Susan James had thought she was maybe going to build there. And we have the plans for that. So that is an option if that's what the committee recommends we build on that site. Our idea was to keep the property. We want to keep it for years to come for ourselves. We are locals. We love the neighborhood. Like I said, our kids, I'm a teacher here. Our kids are growing up here. So we intend to keep it and have that as an investment property for ourselves that we will maintain well. But if the committee sees another idea, then I guess we're willing to go down that path as well. But we were told by email a year ago that a stacked triplex was
suitable for that property.
So we've been working with a designer and in conference with with Mary and Carl. And
now we're hearing about all these different reasons why it's not suitable. So it's a little bit.
But we understand that hardscapes and some of these bylaw issues come up. So we're new and open-minded.
Thanks, Deegan. I will now entertain questions or comments from the committee members. One of the reasons, like I was here on the committee when that original design went through, one of the reasons it wasn't built, that house, was the height of it, and because there was a 0 setback from the street line, which posed a problem with the hydro and the distance from the hydro lines to that building. Now, I don't know what the height, you have no elevation, I have no elevation heights on the building you're proposing, but I would say, in my line of work, I did all kinds of things like this, making sure buildings cleared hydro lines, which they have a set of rules down depending on what the hydro is, of what clearance there should be on that building.
Yep.
But I know this building's not as high as the building the house that was proposed in there, so.
And it's set back further from the hydro lines.
Set back 3 meters, but I still think there's the upper portion of the hydro on the outer wires towards the lot. That's what would be the critical point of it.
Yep.
Anyways, other than that, I'll let some of the other committee members have Wendy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in I agree with Carl in suggesting that we defer this, but I will say that I love the brownstone idea. It's not the same as what the other neighborhoods, other homes in the neighborhood exactly look like, but this committee has passed design. Well, that's not our role. We have accommodated other small lots that were of a completely different design from the other houses in the neighborhood. So I don't think we're setting any precedent with this. I think there is some work to do over the hardened surface and the parking and whatever else you come up with. But in principle, I don't think there's anything wrong with what the Mackeys have suggested here.
Bill?
It seems to me that there are minor tweaks that need to be made with on this design and on the proposal, and I see no reason at all why it cannot be deferred, not for a long period of time, but at least until another meeting could be held in January. And so, if it comes to that, I will move that we defer it.
Jay?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Mackeys, for your vision. I mean, as you know, our strategic plan includes housing and you know, intensification and getting people, you know, living downtown and that type of thing. And I think, you know, your vision is great. And I think that, you know, the work you've done with Carl and Mary has been fruitful. I think there's maybe a little more to do, but overall, the idea of and what I've seen here looks really good. So yeah, I concur with staff's recommendation to defer for now, and I can tell you that there's been many occasions at this committee, especially recently, where we've had concerns from the neighbors and from other, and we've been able to work it out, and that's a tribute to Carl and Mary. And I think that you know, I think we can make something work here. The public works concerns, hopefully they can be addressed, and then you guys can get going. So, but for now, I think that you guys maybe have a little more work to do, and then we'll go from there.
Jacqueline? Thanks, Jay. Jacqueline?
Mr. Chair, I just have a question for Carl. When he talks about wanting more answers or the reasons for deferral, what exactly are you hoping will be accomplished when you defer? What are some of the other options? What are you thinking would be a solution?
Carl?
Thank you, Jacqueline. And I'll just jump in with an answer to the first question. According to the design submitted, the building height is proposed at about 26 feet. So that the maximum height in the R4 zone is 35 feet. So by partially burying the first floor, the Mackeys have actually reduced the profile of the building. So it actually is a little bit, certainly lower than what was approved beforehand, but and definitely lower than what the zoning bylaw requires. So I think in this case, we in discussing with the Mackeys earlier, the committee meets on a monthly basis, and certainly we can bring back a revised proposal with public notice for the January meeting. So I think at this point they're interested just in and I don't want to speak to them, but when we touch base with the applicants following this meeting and go over some design options, I think we're just interested in what the committee would like to see as see us focus on. So from the staff perspective, we're interested in a reduction in hardened surfaces, and we've looked at a few ways in which we can potentially achieve that through parking, for instance, or maybe through the change in the overall footprint of the building, just different options that we can bounce around. But I think also if there's anything else that the committee is interested in seeing as well, I think we'd welcome that those suggestions.
Jack?
I hate to sound like a broken record on these things, but as far as Public Works, their concerns, as far as the parking and the snow clearing provisions, you know, those are my concerns, and perhaps the deferral would address some of these a little bit.
Thanks, Jack. Jacqueline?
Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to understand what the purpose of deferral is actually going to accomplish. We're either asking them to reduce the size of the building or drop a parking space. You know, I own multi-residential units, and as a landlord, if snow's an issue, you're trucking it out. I mean, that's the solution when you're in town. So, I mean, I think the fact that there's 4 parking spaces is a good thing to get the cars off of the street, especially in the wintertime. So, I guess my follow-up question would be for Carl. A single-family home, would that not be the same size or bigger than what the applicant is proposing?
Carl?
Yes, absolutely. And I didn't run a comparative numbers, but there was a single family home that was envisioned for the site previously was very large. I think the key difference in terms of hardened surfaces here is simply the requirement for parking. So a single family home would just need a driveway, perhaps a garage that can be accommodated, and there's way more room for the landscaped open space, for all of that. And in this case, just based on the nature of the development, there is that requirement for additional hardened surfaces and parking. So that's the key difference. And I think the reason why the zoning bylaw broadly supports a higher lot sizes for denser forms of development. So it becomes more of a parking issue.
Thanks, Carl. Wendy?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think the only hesitation from my and what I'm hearing from some of the others is to address the Public Works issue. I other than that, I don't see any barriers to this moving forward, other than I and members of this committee want to address what Public Works is saying with regard to stormwater and hardened surfaces. If that can be done by whatever means, then we're good to go. I'm good to go after that.
Thanks, Wendy. Jay?
Exactly. And I think that that's the reason for the deferral. And I don't think it's a deal breaker at all. I think it's something that's doable. And I know our staff will get it done, and I'll come back the next meeting and then we'll get this done.
Tegan? Yeah? Matthew?
Would you guys rather see 3 parking spaces rather than 4 so we can get less hardened surface?
Carl?
Oh, perhaps I'll defer. I'll let the committee respond to that first, but I was just going to note that technically the committee cannot formally approve a reduction in the parking spaces tonight, because that's a different variance that has not been circulated to the public, and that's one of the reasons for deferral. That would go back to the public, and with the revised proposal, I don't see any reason why that can't happen on the January meeting. Certainly from the staff end, we'll work with the Mackeys and the Public Works Department to make sure that whatever comes forward, it satisfies those concerns. But I'll let the committee respond, I guess, to what the fundamental question is a reduction of the parking space perhaps something that the committee is open to? I can't say that you are committed to it, because that is a separate process that you'd need to follow. But I think, or is it something that the committee is open to considering?
Thanks, Carl. Wendy?
Yeah, if Public Works says that will get us where the Mackeys want to go, then we will approve, or we would certainly consider reducing the requirement for 4 parking spots. So yeah, if that addresses Public Works concern, again, we can. Or if somebody comes up with some new brilliant technology, But if the easiest way is to drop out a parking spot and that satisfies Public Works, then that seems to me to be the easiest path.
Thanks, Wendy. Bill?
Well, those were going to be my remarks as well, and that is, if we defer this and allow the staff to have a few more discussions with the proponents and then present the results of that study at our next meeting, I don't see why we could not defer it.
Thanks, Bill. I have a question for Matt. The site drainage pit at the back. If there's no storm sewers there, where is it going to drain?
The idea is that it drains within the rock that's there.
So it's just a surface pit itself.
Well, it's a large pit that would contain some sort of aggregate that would allow a large volume of water to sit within it. That is something that would be designed by an engineer to accommodate the amount of water that would be that would come off the building.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee members? Jacqueline?
Mr. Chair, I just want to comment that I like the application as it stands. I don't see the need to defer it. I think more parking is better. I think it's going to be a beautiful building. The fact that we haven't received public comment on it, I think that says a lot, especially in this neighborhood. That's my thought.
Thanks, Jacqueline. No, I see nothing wrong with the design, other than the fact with the hydro there that may set you back. I don't know, but it should be checked out. That's the only question I have with the development itself. So are there any other questions? Okay, the committee has a task in making a decision for this application under Section 45 of the Planning Act. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain a motion. Wendy?
I move that we defer until Public Works issue is addressed and to their satisfaction, and subsequent to that, move on with this rather beautiful build.
Do I have a seconder? Jay? All in favor?
I'm in a meeting, I can't talk right now.
We gotta wait for Bill to come back. He's left.
Maybe he fell off the chair.
No, he didn't. Some jerk won't leave me be.
Okay,
You never get those kind of.
All in favor? Carried.
Thanks for your investment, Matthews.
Yes.
Thanks for your time and your support of our vision, and we look forward to reconvening with you next month.
Thanks, Tegan, Matt.
Thank you. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process of application MV 20-06. Any participants that have not signed in or required further notice regarding the application are asked to please reach out to the planning coordinator, Mary Remick, by phone at the town hall. Appeal rights, as prescribed by the Planning Act, will be outlined on the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or the process, I invite you to get in touch with our senior planner or planning coordinator. This concludes the public meeting for MV 20-06 for 36 Maple Avenue. Participants who do not wish to participate in the remainder of the meeting are welcome to sign out. I'll now turn the meeting over to Senior Planner Carl Grenke to report on notification and summary of application ZA-20-08. Following his presentation, I will call on the public participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. I will also offer the applicants or their agents in attendance an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone who's waiting for the Sussex and William zoning application. So, Mr. Crawford, if you can set up the final PowerPoint for tonight. Thank you. So this is a public meeting to consider a zoning amendment application at the corner of William and Sussex. Next slide, please. The applicant is Wilson Pazil, and the agent who's here this evening on the application is planning consultant Tracy Zander. So there's the property. It's at the corner of Sussex and William, and also a number of rail lines there at the southeast end of town. Next slide, please. So the property is about half an acre in size, frontage on both public roads. It has been vacant for many years. The way I understand, there was a service station at one point before. It is in a fairly, it is in a residential area, but of course it fronts on it faces an active rail yard with the via rail line very close to the property. So what's being proposed is a two-story mixed-use building, a ground floor commercial unit at the intersection of William and Sussex, about 900 square feet, with an apartment above that at also about 900 square feet. And that is proposed to be joined with 6 two-story townhouse-style units facing William Street. And those would be proposed to be about 1,300 square feet in size. And those would be all 2 stories. So those would be oriented towards William. The property itself is pretty flat and vacant, of course, and features mature shrubs along the east and south lot lines that form people's side and rear yards. Next slide, please. So the official plan designates this property as uptown mixed use, and that's a designation that sort of rings most of the properties that are adjacent to the rail yard along Victoria Avenue and along in this area. And it accommodates a mix of commercial and residential development with an emphasis on commercial activity. So there is industrial zoning in effect for the property that accommodates, of course, the general industrial zone accommodates a lot of industrial type uses that are permitted as of right here, and commercial uses as well. And then just a little technical provision that applies in this application is the zoning bylaw defines the front lot line for the corner lots as the short line abutting the street. So the eastern lot line intersecting William Street, even though it's along the neighbor's side yards, is technically the rear yard, and that's just a technical component of this application. Next slide, please. So what's being proposed here is a local commercial special exception zone. And the local commercial is one of our commercial zoning categories that allows a smaller range of commercial uses than what you see in, say, the downtown commercial areas or the highway commercial areas. It allows a range of commercial uses that are generally thought to be more compatible in a local neighborhood setting. The zone also allows residential units, but requires the commercial development. So the concept here is basically compliant with the C2 zone. And they are seeking a site-specific exception that accommodates a 5-foot setback from the eastern lot line, which faces the neighbor on William Street. So that's the proposed setback from the new building to that area. Next slide, please. Also part of this proposal is a holding provision, and a holding provision is the closest thing that that legislation allows us to get to conditional zoning. So what's being asked here is for council to approve the principle of the land use. However, stipulate the development cannot actually occur until a proposed until an environmental site assessment and record of site condition is submitted. So we understand there may have been and that given the zoning, given the industrial zoning and the proximity to the rail lines, we need to investigate for potential for contamination, and that would typically be required prior to the final development approval of the site. So that would be a condition of, essentially a condition of primary zoning approval. Next slide, please. So the applicants have provided some supporting rationale to support this application. A planning rationale submitted by Tracy Zander that describes the proposal, provides a technical assessment of compliance with the official plan and provincial policy statement, a concept plan that's coming up on the slide here, a preliminary site grading and servicing plan, a stormwater management brief. The official plan also required the submission of a noise and vibration study to evaluate the potential of impact of noise and vibration from abutting streets and the rail line, and that's required to identify and potentially mitigate concerns. An environmental investigation report from 1993 was also submitted that provided a little bit of site history to the site. It doesn't tick the boxes that the official plan requires for managing and identifying the potential contamination issues. That's what would be addressed through the holding zone, but it gives some history and shows that this has been looked at, and all supporting information is available as part of the public record. Next slide, please. So the concept plan that's being proposed here, William Street is at the top, and we can see that that the townhouse units would access William Street through walkways, but parking would come in off of Sussex. So that would be so there'd be rear accesses to the site as well. Next slide, please. So there's just the site context taken in a late fall day. It shows the interrelationship between this area, the street, and of course the rail facilities nearby, and also the residential. It's a bit of a transition area between the rail lands and the residential neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So of course, this proposal involves the request to change the land use rules for the area of land, and public consultation with those who live nearby and who have an interest in that is absolutely essential, and the committee here is eager to hear the feedback that we do receive, and it's also an opportunity for the proponents to present their proposal, respond to questions that may arise, and ultimately all of that helps inform staff and committee recommendations to council. Next slide, please. So, and the consultation through this process, it allows us to engage technical agencies, local expertise, Public Works, RVCA, as well as CPR have been circulated and discussed, and we do have an applicant, and of course we do have the legislative requirements under the Planning Act to notify neighbors, post the notice on the site, and notify applicable public agencies. Next slide, please. So the zoning amendment is the first step of the approvals process for the proposed development. So at this point, they're asking the town to approve the principle of the development, so the use, the density, and the scale. And then once the environmental work is completed, then the holding zone would be lifted through a separate application. And and once the zoning is done, then the applicants can obtain the site plan approval, and that deals with more of these technical aspects that are sort of more granular than the broader zoning. So we'd be looking more at landscaping, the technical details of stormwater management, fencing, building design. That's something that gets into a little more detail than is normally done through zoning, and that would be a separate process once the zoning is complete. So at this stage, planning staff and the Planning Advisory Committee, our collective role is to provide recommendations to council on this application, and the council would have the final decision as to whether to approve or not to approve. Next slide, please. So of course, any planning application, we do when we're considering this application, we review it with the official plan to determine, does this meet council's guiding vision for how we want to see the town develop? How does it comply with, or does it comply with the provincial policy statement that's a guiding higher level provincial document that guides municipal land use decisions? And to assist us in coming to that through that evaluation, we listen to the neighbors, those who are most impacted, as well as those agencies and departments that have legislative mandates and technical expertise that we rely on. Next slide, please. So at this point, we're going to move into the public session of this public meeting, and we will review all written and verbal comments received. If you're here if you're here or watching at home and you don't have anything to say tonight, but something comes to mind later, we welcome your participation. Comments are welcomed up until council makes a decision. So you have a little bit of time. A report and a recommendation will be brought forward to the committee of the whole and council, and that will likely happen in early January. So ultimately, council has the decision on, would be making the decision on the application, and then there is a 20-day appeal period. So I'll pause there and let the chair take over once again.
Thank you, Carl. We'll begin hearing from members of the public. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. If you have signed in with the recording secretary and have requested to speak to this application, I will call you by name one at a time to offer your feedback. The first one I'm going to call is Norman Kummer.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. So I have one question. I want to make sure I'm reading the plans correctly. Given that the bedrock is only about 1 meter below the soil line, are there any plans to disturb the bedrock?
I have no idea.
So I guess my comment comes in is, I understand it. I don't believe there are basement units in this structure, because my concern is, how are they going to take the bedrock out? Blasting, drilling, whatever.
Well,
and how does that affect us? So that's my question.
Okay. And that's the only question you have?
That's my only concern at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just hang on a bit, and the agent will have a chance to, maybe she can add, and the planners, maybe she can answer your question, and that time will come in a few minutes.
No problem.
The next one I'm going to call is Ron Lyon.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, committee members, neighbors. I live beyond the 120-meter circle of that property. I live at 155 Chambers Street, which puts me on the south side of Chambers Street. I've lived here for years, since I was a kid. It is our neighborhood. I have a few questions concerning this development. My number one question, first of all, I have a comment, I guess I should say. Mr. Grenke called it a former service station site. I believe likely it was a former bulk oil site, but I stand to be corrected. My next question and comment is Sussex Street traffic. Obviously, we see from the pictures that the units will have 2 parking lots per unit, and the traffic will all exit onto Sussex Street. So that will, to take them somewhere else, they will either go right onto William Street or go left and down onto either Kent Street, which is protected by stop signs, or onto Chambers Street, where they will encounter a stop sign and have to join up with the busier side of Chambers Street. So I guess my question there is, has the town considered, or am I premature in even saying this, has the town considered this added traffic? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying, has the town considered that? My third point as I've heard, is environmental site assessment. Until tonight, I called it environmental site investigation, but I guess it's assessment. So I understand this report was from September of 1993, which was in the last century, 27 years ago. So I'm sort of hearing tonight that there would be another assessment, a newer type of assessment brought forward if this goes ahead. My fourth comment is, and I must say, I do not live next to this site. I'm saying that again because I can see some of my neighbors down there that are closer than I am. But my comment is, infilling is great for the world. It means it's already serviced. People can get water, sewer. I know they will need to do the hookups and all of that. But the areas in infilling, we all understand that there's a lot less impact as opposed to going away and beyond. Thank you for listening to my comments.
Thanks, Ron. Ian McIntyre.
All right, thank you. Couple of questions. You've obviously addressed my concern, or you're going to address my concerns about the stormwater. As you know, we have a real bad problem on this street with stormwater. Second question I had was the distance away from my property. I'm at 119 right beside this vacant lot. And if I heard you correctly, is the building going to come over 1.5 meters from my house? From my property line, sorry? You want to do a reduction, I think it's from 8 meters down to 1.5 meters. You said that the back of the building would back along my property line.
Yeah, the side yard proposed or not side next to you is 1.5 meters.
Is that to the building proposed, or is that?
No, that's the actual, that's the minimum.
But maybe I heard you wrong. Were you not proposed, or somebody had proposed to drop this down to 1.5 meters from 8 meters to have this passed?
No, 8 meters is the rear yard.
Yeah, but I thought that they said that the property beside it, which would on William Street, which is mine, and that would be the back of it.
No, that's the side yard.
Carl's got his hand up there.
The side yard next to you is 1.5 meters.
I'm just waiting to hear what this gentleman has to say.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Based on the zoning definitions we have, actually Sussex Street is defined as the front yard, and the rear yard would be, Mr. McIntyre is correct. The rear yard would be defined as the lot line facing alongside 119. So the proposal seeks permission for a 1.5 meter setback from the edge of the building to Mr. McIntyre's rear or side lot line there.
So I would hope you would take that into consideration. I don't know how many people would want a building 1.5 meters away from your property line, but I sure don't.
Okay. Any more questions, Ian?
No, that'll be it for now. You said I can email any questions in that we might have?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sally Arble.
Hi, I'm on Kent Street, and Kent Street has irregular lots, and there's been problems when they go to sell the properties that the surveys don't add up to what the lot is. So is this, are they going to have a survey done on that lot?
My knowledge, there already is a survey done on it.
Okay, because I know that I've lived here for 34 years. And when my husband passed away and I had to get this put in my name, my survey was not right. They had to redo it. So I'm just concerned if it's not a up-to-date survey, that it could impact people on Kent Street.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't have anything to do with people on Kent Street. The only thing that there's a common boundary on the property that would run along the rear of the properties off Kent Street.
Yeah, the problems with Kent, though, they're irregular lots. They're not just straight. They're angled, and then some of them go beyond. Anyways, it is a problem with Kent Street with the surveys. As my lawyer said, it's a Kent Street problem.
Yeah, I know all about it.
Okay.
But the survey on this wouldn't affect the Kent Street.
And I am concerned about the added traffic coming out on Sussex Street. Right now we have the stop signs, but it is hard to see the traffic coming. And you go out on there, you have to come out quite a ways before you can see what's coming around the corner on Sussex from Kent. That is a concern.
Thank you. Tamara Daigle.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Okay, so there's 3 of us that are on this right now, like 30, 28, and 32. So you might hear a couple of voices. But just listening to some of these other comments before I make my own comments, when Sally was just speaking right now, you made a comment that it will not affect Kent Street. I beg to differ on that because we are all on the same block in the same cube. We're all on the same block. So I do think it will affect Kent Street. And Sally made a comment about the surveying. That wasn't one of my concerns, but now it is that I heard that because I agree with Sally that the surveying is totally off in this area. So I hope things are being done properly that way. And I also want to comment on Ian, who spoke earlier, and he mentioned the stormwater. Again, that was not one of my concerns, but it is a huge issue here. And I feel very bad for that gentleman because 1.5 meters is not a very long distance, and that gentleman's privacy is hugely invaded with this development. I appreciate that it is benefiting the town and whatnot, but it's just 1.5 meters is not a large distance. My concerns, though, we have noticed because of Kent Street and it all connecting, the what is it, Running Street, Sussex Street, Kent Street, excessive speeding. Just a few weeks back, a vehicle went into the in towards the train tracks, and that was speeding around the corner. So I already have in my location, which is right nearby, I already have issues about parking and speeding in this area. And I can't help but think with this development that there will be children moving into these houses. And my concern is the children's space, playground area, minimal yard for them, and the speeding, like I mentioned, in the streets. So a lot of my concerns boil down to parking, the speeding, children play area, the blind spots that are already in this area. Though, I guess those are my biggest concerns. Sorry if I rambled.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a couple of friends here that live on either side of me. Can we just confirm if they would like to add something?
Okay.
So I'm from 28 Kent Street. My biggest concern is the parking. Right now, they're trying to take the parking off of Kent Street as it is. So if there's only 14 spaces for parking for this unit, plus a commercial store in it, where are these people gonna park? As it is, we can't park, we're having issues parking on our street if we have multiple vehicles. So where are all these extra added people going to park?
Okay. We can address that. I'll get somebody to address that. Any more questions?
What kind of commercial property is going in there? Is it going to be a bar? Is it going to be a car auto parts place? Is it going to be a store? What are we looking at?
Okay, I can't answer that, but we have the planner here. She can address these questions.
Thank you.
I will now ask the applicant or the agent to provide any further clarification or comments on the public's concerns. Tracy?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, committee members and staff and members of the public. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. My name is Tracy Zander. I'm a professional planner. I represent Wilson Basil, who's the developer of this property. So I've tried to make notes as everybody commented. Hopefully I can respond to everything and then happy to answer more questions from there. So the question about the ground bedrock and the foundation, the intent is to build a slab on grade construction. There are no basements in this design, so I'm not expecting any blasting or bedrock disturbance to support this building. The environmental site assessment and the former land uses, so there has been a firm retained to complete the environmental site assessment. That study is underway right now. I don't have the results of that yet, but as Carl has indicated, the development could not proceed on this property until the environmental site assessment is done and accepted by all the appropriate parties. So even if you approve the zoning for the use in principle, the site development is still kind of delayed to ensure that that environmental report is completed, submitted, and accepted by the appropriate parties. So the site plan does show a total of 14 parking spaces. And so just so we're clear, there are 7 residential units. Your zoning bylaw requires 1.5 parking spaces per unit. So that's a total of 9 parking spaces required for residential. The 14 on the site would meet the requirements for the residential units 9, and the other 5 units would be for the small commercial space. So respect the concerns about parking. I hear them on every time I have an infill project, but the parking requirements to meet this proposal in the context of your zoning bylaw are all accommodated on the site. Stormwater management. So there was a stormwater management report submitted. I don't think we've seen any comments yet from town staff, but that would be a normal part of the process. So we certainly have to deal with stormwater and make sure that's managed correctly. And I very much respect the comments from the neighbors that if there are some existing stormwater concerns in the neighborhood, those definitely need to be addressed through the stormwater design. Traffic, there has not been a request from the town for us to provide a traffic brief. That did not come up in the pre-consultation discussions with staff. I'm not expecting this to have a significant traffic impact on the neighborhood, but I guess I'll defer to staff and the committee if you want to discuss traffic further. Understand the comments about the survey. There's a very old village plan underlying here, and there has not been a boundary survey done on this lot, but I do respect that there are, I don't know, 5 or 6 lots perhaps along Kent Street that back onto this property. So we do need to make sure that the boundary of this property and its relationship to those lots is correct. So if a survey needs to be done to ensure that's correct, then absolutely, that can absolutely be done. The comments about, you know, if children move in, families move in, park areas and so on, again, respect that. There is some room on this site. What you have is a kind of high-level site sketch, but it doesn't have any outdoor living space or landscaping shown, but there is some room for that on this site. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think just a block or two down Sussex Street, there is some public park space, ball diamonds and things like that that are in this neighborhood. So there is park space nearby to meet the needs of families. The neighbor that's immediately abutting on William Street. So yes, the proposal does show a 1.5 meter setback to that lot line. That really functions like a side yard setback here because of the orientation of this lot. Sussex Street is considered the front yard, which makes the abutting property line to that gentleman's lot technically the rear yard, and so that's why the exception is requested. But functionally, these units will face to William Street, the same direction as all of the other houses that face to William Street, and so that will really be a side yard setback between the lot line, the side yard to the gentleman's house next door, and the side of the end unit of this building. I personally, I like how this site is laid out. It's a bit of an odd shaped lot, but I think the building fits well. And the way the building is placed fairly close to William Street gives that kind of people presence with walkways out to the street, and the parking is tucked in behind. So I like that street presence and the way it's drawn. The question about the commercial space. So the space is, I don't know, just about 900 square feet. It's not a huge space. I think what you'll probably see there is a professional office. Or a professional service, something like that. So, you know, a lawyer or something like that. It's a pretty small space. There's a short list of uses that are permitted in the commercial zone. I think Carl mentioned at the very beginning, but I would reiterate the property is currently in an industrial zone. There are a very long list of uses that would be permitted as of right on this property in this industrial zone. So I think this is definitely kind of increasing the compatibility with the neighborhood to bring primarily residential and probably a small professional office. I'm going to throw this out, even though my client's not on the call, I don't think. I'm going to just flip to the zoning. The commercial zoning would allow, there's a short list, I think, of uses that would be permitted. I think if it makes the neighborhood more comfortable, I don't think there'd be great opposition to taking some of those things off the use. If I remember correctly, a gas bar is permitted, local commercial, yeah. So a gas bar is permitted. There's a couple of uses there that perhaps wouldn't be that desirable in this neighborhood and really couldn't happen in that 900 square feet anyways. So that's perhaps something we can talk about as the application moves forward. I hope I've covered most of the comments, but happy to answer other questions if I've missed anything. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. If you want to check, I'm almost positive Jeff Shipman from North Gore has a plan of survey on that lot.
He could, yes.
Yeah, I worked on it some years ago.
Okay, good, thank you.
I will now ask if there's any questions or comments from committee members. Jack.
Everything seems, you know, very straightforward, and I think it was well presented, and I made a list of all the different concerns, but I think Tracy, she covered most of them there, or all of them, I should say, right now. Anyway, it sounds good to me.
Thanks, Jack. Wendy?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Again, this is it's totally in keeping with sort of a good infill. Tracy referenced that this is now zoned industrial, which would not be nearly as popular in a residential setting as changing zoning. It's been vacant for years. It's good infill for the town. It provides housing. And again, speaking to the council's strategic plan, it provides more selection in our housing stock. Tracy's been able to answer most of the questions that people have now, and there may be more questions as we move forward. Once the zoning's approved, we go on to, site plan approval and get into more detail on some of the things that people may have more questions. But I see no reason not to change the zoning on this property.
Thanks, Wendy. Anyone else?
Oh.
Jack?
John, just a second thing. I had people who came to me and they were concerned that these were going to be like tiny homes, to use that phrase, and seeing that they're 3-bedroom homes, 3-bedroom residences, I think is more than a positive here.
Thanks, Jack. Anyone else? The committee now has the task of making a recommendation to council on the zoning bylaw amendment application. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain a motion. Jay?
I will move it.
Seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process for application ZA-20-08 for the corner of Sussex Street and William Street East. Any participants that have not signed in and require further notice regarding this application are asked to please reach out to the planning coordinator, Mary Remick, by phone at the town hall. Appeal rights as prescribed by the Planning Act will be outlined on the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or the process, I invite you to get in touch with our senior planner or planning coordinator. This concludes the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. We will now move to the next item on our agenda. Thank you all for attending.
Carl's
got his hand up.
Carl's signaling you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So just Tracy in the meeting had suggested refining the list of permitted uses in the zone to perhaps remove some of the ones that would be not suitable in a more residential area. And that seems that from my end, that seems like a reasonable step. So moving forward, I'm just confirming that the committee would support such a modification and support me working with Tracy on that list there.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Carl. Moving on, we'll move on to priority issues. We have none. Correspondence items, nothing. Project updates, nothing. Our next meeting is the Planning Advisory Committee meeting, December 17th, 2020. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Jay? Seconded by Jacqueline. Thank you.